is Edwin K. Morris, and you are about to embark on the next Pioneer Knowledge Services Because You Need to Know, a digital resource for you to listen to folks share their experience and knowledge around the field of knowledge management and nonprofit work. This episode is brought to you by Stas Balanevsky, a certified EOS implementer based in Buffalo, New York. Get a grip on your business with EOS.
Hello, my name is Ninez Piezas-Jerbi. I currently live in Ashburn, Virginia. I used to live in Europe, but now I'm in the US of A. The thing I have learned is you can't control everything. You do your best, but you do what's within your control and let God do the rest. The last book I read was The Heart of Laser Focus Coaching by Marian Franklin, and also Kundalini Yoga for Self-Care and Caregivers. These are important to me because I think coaching is a way for people to find out what their treasures are, because it's not just about giving your treasures, but letting them discover their own treasures. And the second book is about self-compassion. We do a lot in our lives helping people, but usually we take for granted how we take care of ourselves. The topic I can talk for hours. Yoga, leadership, servant leadership, KM, coaching, and how they all help each other. I worked for 33 years, the last 30 years in the field of statistics, but the last 5 of them, or last 6 of them, was in KM and leadership. I love to sing. I love to listen to music. I am inspired when I do listen to music. And I stay connected to people by listening to their stories, and most of all, asking how I can be of service to them. If I were stranded on an island, I wish I would be stranded with my husband, because I wouldn't be able to make a fire by myself. A mirror and water.
Oh, is the mirror for like signaling aircraft? Is that what?
Oh, yeah. Obviously. I just learned that as well. Create value by helping others discover their own strengths and treasures. And the absolute best advice I got from somebody was were 2 quotes. One is, even if nothing changes, if I change, everything changes. And the second one is, feedback is as much about the one who is giving it as it is about who it's for.
Ninez, please define for the audience what leadership is.
Leadership for me is influence, like what John Maxwell used to say, or still says. Leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. And I think that's very true. And there's a quote that I like so much. If you're a leader and you have no followers, you're just like somebody who's taking a walk. I thought that was so funny, because if you lead and nobody follows you, you're not really a leader. That means you can't influence anybody.
Yeah, but nobody ever argues. It's great, Oh, no pushback ever. Every idea is perfect.
So I love that. I love that quote. But it's true. I think it's influence.
Let's go down the road of, where does leadership come from? Is it a trainable trait, or is it just inborn?
Well, you need to. All leaders are born, of course, because everybody is born. But I think you need to acquire leadership skills. It's all about connecting with people, learning about them, knowing about them, because it is about people. It's personal, too. Leadership is personal, very personal.
Do you find that a lot of folks fall into leadership positions that are not skilled at all?
Yeah, I find that people who are in leadership positions fall into them because of their technical expertise, not because of their leadership skills.
Yeah, so that's kind of a painful hurdle sometimes. Mm-hmm. Everybody is kind of like trying to keep things moving, but then you got that influence piece that doesn't come easy. You can negatively influence people probably easier than you can positively. Where does the training come from? If you were talking and mentoring a young person or an old person, doesn't really matter, a person, what would you give them for advice for the things they should be aware of becoming a leader?
I think the first thing they should learn is emotional intelligence, empathy, self-regulation, social skills, collaboration. It's all about people. And to be able to work with people, you need to know how to control yourself, your mind and your body, and your emotions and your thoughts. You first have to be the CEO of your beta, which is something that I got from a teacher of mine. Beta meaning behaviors, emotions, thoughts, actions.
Walk me some more down that trail of this beta.
Well, if you are supposed to influence somebody and you get all rattled because just that one person throws you a trigger, then everything goes down the drain. You explode and nothing happens because you fight, and then the objective doesn't happen. What you wanted to do together doesn't happen because you need to work together.
Tell me again the BETA acronym.
Behavior, emotions, thoughts, actions. If you have emotional intelligence, you're able to regulate your own emotions, you're able to regulate your thoughts, and you're able to have empathy, which is very important. It's not all about you all the time. You need to know what the other person's perspective is and what the other person's feeling to be able to understand it and know what to do for the person and work together.
It's interesting you talk about these facets of leadership, and I review the latest of history of political figures, and I wonder, where did they skip that lesson? Where did most political people just not even get anything towards this?
When I was young, I never really learned about leadership. It wasn't part of the school curriculum. I mean, at least during my time. Now there are courses about leadership, but during my generation, nothing, not at all. If only there was at the time, I would have taken it, but I found out later.
You got to wonder, where's those institutions that should be practicing or at least making people aware of leadership skills? I was in the military. You get that a lot. It's reinforced over and over again about leadership.
I think the Boy Scouts have
that. Yeah. Well,
scouting, Boy Scouts, Peace Corps. During my childhood, it was about church. When you volunteered in church, helping others, serving others, leading ministries, then you get a dose of leadership, or you get into an opportunity to practice
You're
leadership.
Basically getting your toes in the water to start seeing all the triggers and traps and things that you need to work with in this new paradigm. So let's talk about organizations. Have you ever seen the opportunity where someone that's not in the leadership position is actually leading? What do you do in that circumstance, right? So somebody that's in the middle of the rungs of the ladder is just a natural, they're either passionate about the whatever, or they're just knowledgeable, or they just have followers. They influence just by being them. Does that end up being a competing situation for the person that's actually in the position that's supposed to be leading? Or does it just happen naturally? I mean, is it just a natural occurrence that shouldn't be a big deal?
It shouldn't be a big deal because that person who is that natural leader in the middle level will have the smarts enough to be able to work with that leader who is actually in a position to lead and work with them and bring out the best of this person, this official leader who has the title. Yeah. But I really think that a leader needs to lead from where he is, no matter what he or she is, no matter what title you have. You can be a leader without a title.
Does that create a competitive workplace? Is there a competition for that?
For the people who are in positions, it could make them very insecure because it makes them irrelevant and nobody follows them, or they're only followed because they have the title. The ones who are really the natural leaders are the ones people really love to follow. And that could be a threat. If they were wise, they would work together.
I hear that. I think most people would react negatively if they saw that happen in their command or in their structure. But see, that goes back to if they had good emotional intelligence, they would see the big picture and say, oh, well, that's great. I'll just fishtail in with this person and we'll do this all together. Perfect. It's complementary, not competitional. Is that a word? Competition? It's not competitive.
I agree.
What is it that makes people follow? What is the thing that people stand up and say, yeah, I'll do that?
Trust that they're not there for their personal interests. It's service to others. If they sense that you have personal intentions, that you have an agenda, nothing's going to happen.
Okay. All right.
So I think that's the key. If they can see through you and what your intentions are, then. But on the other hand, if you are somebody who's really working for the organization or you care about the people, then you say jump and they say hi.
Yeah. Well, that goes back to your concept of thoughts and actions, right? If people see that you're living your truth, then it's transparent, right? And that's really the essence of gaining trust, is that if you can show you've got nothing to hide, then that's easier to connect.
Agree. It's not really just about charisma, too. It's somebody people feel safe with. People aren't threatened by some people. If you're not somebody who is a threat to people, who will always have their concerns in your mind, then, yeah, I think that's the person who they will follow.
We've kind of walked the dog all around leadership and traits. How does this translate to the world of knowledge management?
Well, knowledge management is all about change, and people do not like change. And the first thing they say, at least in my experience, they'll say, "Give me one reason why I should follow you."
The normal response is because I said so. That's why. Yeah, right.
And if your answer should be, it's because it's for the good of not just your unit, but the whole organization. And trust me, it's not because I want to have a bonus or a promotion or I want to be popular. It's not about that. So if they trust you, then they know that your intention is pure. You need to make them feel that, not just see it, but feel it. That's why trust is very important. And you need somebody who knows how to handle conflict very well, of course, or resistance very well, because there's going to be a lot of clashes of priorities. People are territorial. So you need somebody who knows how to be secure in himself and thinking of the other at the same time.
Well, that sounds easy.
Yeah. It does. It does sound easy.
But it's not. It can be very difficult.
But that's why I say that if you're somebody who oozes with safety, trust, I'm comfortable, my door is open, tell me what your problem is and I will try to help you, and not somebody who's like, okay, I'm here to tell you what to do, then it's much likely that they will approach you and say, listen, I have a problem, can you help me? Or if you're somebody who's willing to say, I have a problem and I know you can help me, could you help me? You're humble enough to say, I don't know all the answers, but I know you have the answers to my problem and to other people's problems. Could you help me and can you help us? Then if you have the security to say that, if you feel secure enough to say that to others, the vulnerability to show you don't know everything, then you'll be a successful CAM person.
Advocate, yeah. In your last employ, when you were doing knowledge management, what was the key ingredient to what you saw there in a positive and or a negative, how CAM was doing there?
I think the key ingredient was really speaking their language and also involving them, because CAM was such an abstract concept to many colleagues. And so you first had to explain to them. They didn't like jargon. They said, what is that? That's just private sector people say.
Yeah.
So speak to me in language I understand. The first resistance was, I don't have time to do this. I know it's different, but I don't have time. I have my own ways of doing it.
Exactly.
But if you involve them instead of just telling them, then the likelihood that they will get engaged is much higher because they understand more if they're
involved. It goes back to your word of CAM advocate, right? So you have to be a bit of a salesperson in that regard, because you have to, going back to leadership traits, you have to build transparency and trust and all those things that make things work.
Yeah. Although sometimes when you say salesperson, sometimes salespeople do whatever it takes to sell. You don't want to be like that either. You want somebody who's, I'm selling something, but only that's what's relevant to you. I'm not there to just sell it.
Maybe marketing is a better term.
Yeah.
You're a marketer. Well, and really, I mean, you're marketing the benefit, you're marketing the value, you're establishing a case to where you're trying to win hearts and minds of people to say, oh, I see that. Okay, you got me. All right. Because if you just put out, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink.
Yeah.
The idea that people stop just short because they either don't trust, they didn't get the communication well, they don't understand, there's no comprehension, there's no value proposition to get them over the fence. But once the culture adapts and adopts, and I've seen this happen where instead of trying to do an enterprise rollout of a KM-related project, they just do the onesie-twosies. They try to do a groundswell of grassroots approach, get the culture on board, let the culture pull it in, give them some ownership, give them some agency to participate, and then once they start seeing value, then they become your advocate for the benefit.
I agree with you, because that's how we tried to do that too. But I think you need to do it both ways. You need support from the top and support from the bottom. They meet each other in the middle.
Okay.
Because it's true, the people underneath won't follow if the big people don't practice what you preach. And if there's no money, and if they don't have the infrastructure that allows them to take the time and the resources to be able to practice what we're preaching, then they won't do it, because it's added work for them. What's in it for me? And it's true what KM schools say. It's really about what's in it for me. If that work helps my work, then I'll help you.
Yeah, once it becomes an additional duty, it's not so much fun.
One thing that I did notice about my former place of work is that they really are very committed to the work that they're doing. So if it's going to help how they do their work, well, they will be on board.
What is the best practice, or give us an example of something that was in this rollout, and it sounds like you were in part of a KM institutional rollout by the sounds of it. How did you connect the top and bottom simultaneously? What was your tactic?
Well,
What you just talked us through was of trying to make an Oreo sandwich out of this and get it from both sides.
Well, first, I really had to talk to the top first. I talked to our Director General, I talked to the deputies, and I already primed them, or I already asked them what they thought, and they agreed. But they always said, well, it'll depend on everybody else. If it were up to us, it's okay, but you just have to figure out how to do it, how to properly institutionalize it. That was the next step. But to be able to get both levels involved, it was important to get outside people who know what KM was. And when they would talk, I would get a high-level person and a low-level person in the conversation. And they would talk about a specific topic that relates to a specific KM topic and how it's related to the work, a core topic, a core work program in the organization. And there it made more sense because it was more real. And it wasn't just some theory, some concept that we were trying to impose on people. And if you get people involved, they will understand what you're meaning, what you're talking about.
Did you approach it the idea of like a learning objective, and this is a learning we're gonna teach people?
No, it was more about raising awareness, because people they absolutely did not know what it was. They thought it was just a buzzword, and they said, "What is this?"
So you had to demystify it and make it real.
Correct. Apply it to their own work.
Well, here again, that brings it home and shows how real it can be. Sometimes that is a mark that gets missed. You know, if you don't show value, you got all this power under the hood, can do 160 miles an hour, turbocharged, all this stuff, but you never get out of first gear. Well, you got all this potential, but I don't want to go that fast.
Well, because it is all about people. People take the time to process something that's new. You can't just shove it into them, you know. You need to just slowly let them understand, translate it to their real world every day.
Did you use peer mentoring in this rollout?
We did more bilateral talks.
Tell me about that.
Our team would talk to certain groups of people, certain occupational groups. We talked to team leaders of core projects, because we started with the most important projects first.
Oh, okay.
Because those are the ones where the organization's known for.
You get that, and you probably got the highest risk.
Absolutely.
The highest risk of knowledge loss anyway, right? So let's talk about that, because I think that's another thing that is not a holistic, natural thing that organizations should do, which is do an environmental scan, figure out and triage what's critical, what's not, and figure that out. And then that gives you a plan of attack. You know, it gives you an idea of where's our biggest risk.
No, absolutely. The challenge we had there was teams usually have their usual way of work. And if it already works, they don't want to change it anymore.
Exactly.
So there is still a lot of getting buy-in. And that's why it really helps to get buy-in from the very top to say, you know what, we don't want our organization to just work today. We want it to be running and smooth like an well-oiled machine 10 years from now. So we can't just be good today. We need to be really like turboed up. So we need to put it up a notch.
Let's stick with the car thing. You're tuning it up. You're tuning up the performance just like you would an automobile, but you're doing it for an organization. And it kind of takes the individual out of it when you can couch it like, hey, this is for better performance, period. It's not my pet project. It's not the next thing that we're chasing. This is a transformational, long-term investment.
Yeah. It's just really direction. Where do you want to go? Where do you want to be 10 years from now? And sometimes we're so caught up with the daily work that we forget to have some kind of foresight. What is it that we'd like to be like? What do we want to be like 10 years from now? What do we want to be doing instead of, we can't just be doing this now, and like, in 10 years.
Well, hopefully.
So for 10 years. So.
Hopefully.
Well, at least the world will have changed by then, so we have to be ready.
We have to adapt.
But because people are overworked, they don't have the time to ask those questions as well.
Not everybody can see the strategic view. So I liken it as an old soldier. We had to dig fighting positions, commonly referred to as a foxhole. The thing with once you're in a pit, you can only see about 200 meters, maybe. It depends on the terrain. But if you elevate that to the next echelon up and the next echelon up, that visibility, think of it like you're tactical to strategic in an organization. The higher up, the farther you can see. And the idea is you need to see what's out there to know what's coming. Same concept with an organization. I just don't think enough organizations, there's nobody in the organization that's like the future person, like the future proofer guy, right? And I think they're missing the mark on that. As we all know, trying to keep up is tough.
Yeah, especially now.
Just in the technological changes. And I would be scared to death as a large organization to saying, oh, we're going to buy this system and hope it works, because it could be out of business in 5 years. It could be something totally different. Something could be interjected into the market that totally makes that obsolete. It's painful.
And that's why I think the role, part of the responsibility of the KM team is to put it out there. This is good today, but what about 5 years from now, 10 years from now? And sometimes the role of the team is not to actually do it, but to just throw the question and let people in their units do the work, but put it in their consciousness, their mindset, that we can't just be complacent with what we have today. What got us here won't get us there. So isn't that a famous quote by somebody?
Said it. I like it. That's the first time I've heard it. I like it. What got us here won't get us there.
Yeah. And look, now we have ChatGPT, and then Microsoft has its own equivalent and all that stuff. People will have to look for new jobs.
Well, out of the world of KM, the three main components are people, process, and technology. Where do you find you're most passionate in those three?
People.
Because I find this kind of a funny answer for a statistician, because they like digits and numbers and spreadsheets and the things that go.
It's funny you ask that. The only reason I got into statistics was because I happened to be good in math when I was younger. And my mother said, you're good in math. Okay, take statistics. That's what your sister took. So you do that as well, and that'll get you a job.
Your mom saw the future.
Moms are smart, The first thing is that'll get you a job. Later on, the reason why I got into KM was because statistics are important, that's true, but it's a lot of numbers. If you don't interpret them, nobody will get the message. Yeah. So that means they have to be packaged in a way that people can understand them. And that's where I got into KM. I had to know how to do that.
That user experience to where consumption of content is easy.
Right. And people are interesting. We all have different understandings of things. Some people are very visual, some people are very spatial, some people are all numbers, some people are all words. So you really need to know how to read people. And also, decisions are emotion-based. Because no matter how much facts and figures you have, sometimes you just feel like, nah, it does not feel right. I'm not going to do this, even though I have all the figures that say this is how it is. It's sometimes a feeling or a gut that tells you that, no, we're not doing this right. So it's not always numbers.
They help.
It's about the people behind it.
The numbers help provide decisional material. They point one way or the other or nowhere. They give the ability to help make decisions. And the easier you can make that editable or consumable, the better off for everybody. Because if you got to throw a chart up and then you got to spend a half hour explaining what the chart is, you've already lost them.
Absolutely. And
so
also,
it's the same as KM. It's the same as KM, right?
Yeah.
It's the same thing.
And that's why you need to be some kind of a catalyst. Mm-hmm. the ones who make the decisions, it's not the numbers, it's the people. So if that person who's making the decision doesn't like you, if that person has a grudge against you or has a grudge against your department, no matter how good your argument is, it's not going to go. So you need to cover that part as well.
You're going back to that emotional intelligence again.
I think it's a reality.
It's everywhere. The model of 1940 and how organizations operated and families operated, I'm generalizing, very authoritarian, very, boom, boom, do this. And that whole societal shift to where we went from software developers making the user interface to somebody saying, you know what, That's horrible. We need to make somebody like an artist be able to interpret and be a catalyst for what you're trying to say or interface and make it better. So all of these opportunities are recent history. And it's exciting to see that it's not just a workplace. It's everywhere. The expectation of people has shifted to how they're going to interface the world.
Absolutely. Another thing that's important is focus. But it also depends where you put your focus on, because that will determine where you put your money. That's what will tell you where you value things. If you value your people a lot, you will be investing on their training, on their skills, their emotional well-being, their capacity to build things and to be creative. But if you don't, and if you're just focusing on results without really taking care of the people underneath who do it, you need to find a balance.
What would you suggest to a leader to address that? A leader can't do everything. So how do you triage? How do you assess your risk? Looking at that, like you just said, with the risk of turnover, burnout, people not actually caring of what they do there, where you're lost that oomph of the people. How do they assess that risk?
Morale is a factor. Also, how much people get involved. If there's a meeting, do they all show up? If there's a town hall meeting, is everybody interested? Yeah. Or there's a lot of grievances? That's another indicator. If there's a lot of harassment and things like that. And also just engagement events. I think people take that for granted. If the people are happy, they will go to lengths to make the mandate work, make the organization a well-oiled machine.
It sounds like it's a measurement of engagement. Because we've all seen workplaces where you've got somebody that's 100% disengaged.
Many.
I'm here for the paycheck. I'm going home in 4 hours. Yeah.
The benefits, yeah.
Some organizations can't fire people for being disengaged. So that's a challenge for leadership. Here again, as the catalyst, sometimes you have to be the catalyst for good of the morale of your folks. That's not an easy task.
In my former employer, in former workplace, I created these employee networks where we focused on seeing people as human beings first before employees. We all have a common thing, and that we're all human beings. We all have feelings, we all have families, we all have health issues, we all have parents some of us have children, or some family member we need to take care of. So if we find commonalities in that regard and share our problems, there we'll be able to support each other. And once that bond is formed, if you talk about work, it will be so much easier because, I know this person is hurting, and I'll think twice before I say a bad word about him in a meeting, that sort of thing. I know what he's going through. He's bipolar, or his wife's bipolar. I don't know. That sort of thing. You
start to look at the underlying parts. Well, when you said that about we look at people as humans or human beings, it's common, at least in Western organizations, that humans are an asset. They're like a computer. They're like a vehicle. You do a little maintenance, you plug them in, boom, let's go. Let's get the job done. And I think most organizations function that way. Now, in the military, the common thread was you're all replaceable because we are. We work in a very large organization that has a high expectation. You may not be there in the morning. Everybody is cross-trained to fill in the next gap. We are Legos in that respect because we're all disposable in that framework. And I think part of the problem with organizations, there's a bit of that expectation. This job was open when we hired you. You leave, we'll hire somebody else. So there's a transactional component, I think, that needs to be kind of tuned up a little bit.
I don't understand. What do you mean? How so? Tuned up
to get
how?
It from the transactional relationship of an asset to a functional relationship as a human on that emotional intelligence. So the organization has to exhibit emotional intelligence, not just the people.
Right. Which means that they should have a policy, an HR policy that gives importance to the well-being of their people, because they are the most important asset of the organization. The creativity comes from the people, the ideas come from the people, the work comes from the people.
And they represent the organization to other people.
And the members are people too. The members behind the organization, the ones who pay for the organization, are people too. So, and they're basically your clients, your stakeholders. So,
Well, you've given us lots to think about today. And what would be your advice to somebody going forward around leadership and emotional intelligence?
humility is a big trait that's very difficult to practice.
Meaning what? Tell me what that means.
Yeah, you don't know everything. You may be a leader. You may be somebody who's got the title, who's got the name, who's got the salary. If you want to achieve something, sometimes you can't do it alone because you don't know everything. And the sooner that you show vulnerability, that you don't know everything, that you need to harness somebody else's expertise to be able to do a better job of that, of getting that objective, this mandate that you're charged with, then the better, because the faster you get to the target. It's not just enough to be a leader. You have to be somebody who inspires others to step up to plate, to also be leaders where they are. And I think that's what leaders today who are in the higher ranks, maybe not all of them do that. They're just there because, it's very prestigious to be in my position. This is my job to have the nice decisions. But
I'm very important. Yes.
Right. But at the same time, I have a responsibility. I can't do everything because I don't see everything. So I have a responsibility to inspire those people under me, to delegate them to do things in my place because I don't see the level of detail that they're doing.
What's your definition of knowledge management?
I always like that phrase of knowledge management is knowing what you have and knowing what other people need and bringing them together and letting people have what they need in a way that they can understand it.
So, as a KM person, you're saying that the definition of KM is to be the kind of the connector and instigator and translator and broker.
Yeah. Somebody who can connect the dots.
Yeah.
This person needs this person has this. They should work together.
Well, that requires a lot of awareness there, what you're just saying.
Another leadership skill, self-awareness, another emotional intelligence skill. And also, knowledge management also starts with self-knowledge. That's why leadership is important. Personal leadership is important. You can't lead others if you can't lead yourself.
So do you practice your own knowledge management, your personal knowledge management?
Try. Reflecting is important, and it's hard to find time to reflect. Do you notice that? You do, but you don't sit down and say, now why was that happening?
Well, usually that's the first hour of trying to go to sleep is the reflection of all repeating everything over and thinking.
Well, no, I can't do that before I sleep because I'll never sleep. I need to shut the brain down to be able to sleep. You should do that in the morning.
Well, at least that's my routine. I grab a coffee and sit on the porch and think. And it's a percolation. If you think of how they used to make coffee with a percolator, you're boiling the water to get it go up the stem and then hit the coffee and then drain back down. It's a cycle of percolation. And I think the idea that what you're talking about with this reflection is a key ingredient to the self-awareness, not just leadership, but just being able to be aware of your own actions. I'll give you a case point here. Just recently, I was in a meeting, and it still pops up every sideways moment in a meeting that it shouldn't have been said, and I just had that happen this week, and I said something off the cuff. Everybody laughed. And then later, I'm like, it may have impacted somebody, right? So that awareness wasn't there 20 years ago because this mouth just shot off anything it wanted to. But in the idea of words are things, it can be quite impactful. So an organization I used to work with had a policy of oops and ouch. And the policy was this: an awareness building attempt to get better. Now, we're talking about organizations getting better. Well, we want to get better too, ideally. It basically states, if you say something that you shouldn't have said, off color or not, just something that was stepped on somebody's toes, that's a good way to say it, you say, oops, and then you explain it. And you try to build awareness so that, you don't just say, don't say that. You try to build contextual understanding so it becomes more conscious in that person. The ouch is the painful reaction. The oops is the self-reflection, like, I probably shouldn't have said that. It may have come off a little hokey or offended somebody. And I did that this week. I emailed the person. I said, hey, it was in a meeting you were in, actually.
Don't say.
if you allow people the space for reflection and expect learning, that sets the stage for betterment for all.
Absolutely. Actually, that reflection is what I think is what separates knowledge management from other types of management. Because management is about, oh, do this, do this, do this. But knowledge management says you should also reflect what you do. And sometimes it takes time. You need to take a pause. You need to stop and say, now, is what we're doing actually giving value? Because sometimes you just keep on doing instead of thinking first of what you do. Isn't that the logic of knowledge management? You need to manage what you're doing. Before that, you need to reflect. And that's why this after action thing and lessons learned and all that stuff. And usually organizations, they do because they think busyness is productivity, which is not necessarily the same thing. But they don't really reflect what they do with their time. What you do is a reflection of where you put your money.
Some of those organizations are the kind of organizations that say people can't work from home because we don't know what they're doing.
It's another story.
Yeah, well, I don't care where you sit. Performance is performance.
Absolutely. But a while ago, what you were saying was important, got my attention. Words make worlds. And sometimes one thing that I also think organizations need is people in the organization to have courage to speak up. Because sometimes somebody says something inappropriate and they are just silent enablers.
Yep, exactly.
So the workspace has to be safe enough for somebody to say, you know what, that's not appropriate. You shouldn't be doing that.
Yeah.
And you won't be killed after it, or you won't be punished somehow.
That brings up something in most trainings that I've had on workplace issues. The first empowerment is that you voice it. You go to the person and say, hey, that was offensive. If it doesn't get resolved, then you go to HR or you go to the boss or you go to somewhere else. But the first attempt has to be on the individual, because you're right. If you never say anything, how does anybody know?
That's true. Although when you do speak up, you need to say it in a respectful way. You don't shout profanities and stuff like that. It has to be within rules, within the code of conduct. Now, if everybody plays by that, then we can talk about it.
Well, thanks for talking to me today, my friend. This has been a joy.
You're welcome. It was a pleasure. It's nice to talk about these things.
It brought a smile to your face on a Friday.
Well, thanks for this opportunity, Evan. It was really nice. I like it.
This episode is brought to you by Stas Balanevsky, a certified EOS implementer based in Buffalo, New York. Get a grip on your business with EOS. You have just finished our latest Because You Need to Know, a public service of Pioneer Knowledge Services. Please join us on LinkedIn and find us at pioneer-ks.org.